Sorry for the inconvenience. All right, welcome. We're going to get started. Thank you for coming. We're going to talk about how to ship apps better, faster, stronger. For those who don't know, this is a reference to Daft Punk. So very briefly, my name is Fabien. For those who don't know me, I am the founder of a company called Wolfia, who is all about automated apps, shipment. Before that, though, I've been spending pretty much all of my life shipping mobile apps. I spent about 15 years doing it at different companies. The one you may know is Facebook, but also at many different startups. So I saw a lot of different apps. And as part of my job, I also interviewed a lot of people about how they're releasing their apps and the latest trend in mobile app continuous deployment. So how to ship apps? Well, first of all, I lied to you, so I'm very sorry. This is not a very great start for the talk. But really, you don't want to ship apps. Nobody wants to ship an app. What you really want to ship are features. And in terms of app development, what's very different is if you're shipping apps on the server or on the web, you can simply deploy every single time. And obviously, it's not the case for apps, right? So the only thing that you can do is approximate that. So let me tell you a story about Alice and Bob. This is not a security talk, but those are familiar character, hopefully. So let's say that Alice wants to ship a feature. What does she do? Well, she probably works on a feature branch, make a bunch of changes to the code, and wants to merge it. By the way, if you're not using GitHub or any form of code review and source control, I can do nothing for you, I'm sorry. Please do that first. This is a prerequisite, obviously. Now, Bob is going to go and review the code, right? And probably make a bunch of comments and probably say, wait a minute, this is not right, please change your code and modify it in this way so that we can actually ship it safely. After a while, Alice obviously changes the code and Bob says, okay, we're good to go, let's merge it. Problem is, first of all, obviously, you're going to have a bunch of conflicts. And in many cases, the problem is that there is not one developer. There's not Alice and Bob. There's many people that are actually modifying the code base. And those of you who have been developing for a long time knows already what I'm going to say. Obviously, the answer is you should have made a smaller pull request, right? You should have independent, small changes to your code. You should never just have a massive change that's going to create a lot of conflicts and potentially a lot of problems. But actually, what's just happened is we created for ourselves a new problem. And that new problem is, well, if I want a small pull request, then I have to partially build my feature before I merge it. That's just the way to go, right? I'm going to make a small change, a small logical change to the code base. But in terms of the feature that you're trying to ship, remember we're trying to ship a feature, that feature cannot be built by one small pull request. So in order to fix that problem, you really have two solutions. The first one is to ship when your feature is ready, right? This is pretty straightforward. We're going to just wait. Like I said, we're on an app, not on the web. So we're going to only ship that app when the feature is ready. Simple enough. The second solution is to hide the feature and to say, you know what? I am coding this feature, but I'm just not going to show it to users. I'm going to hide the entry point until it's ready. So let's talk about the first one. Let's say we just want to ship when the feature is ready. But wait a second. Again, right, we are not a single developer on a single app. If that's your case, congratulations. You don't have to worry about any of that. It's probably much easier. But really, what you want is to ship a bunch of features. And so if you only ship when ready, you really are creating for yourself a synchronization problem with all of the other developers. And that means that you're going to wait for all those features to be ready. We don't really want to do that. What is the developer to do? Like, I just stop working, I'm done with my feature, and I wait for everyone to ship their own? Like, that doesn't sound right. And so in practice, this is not really an option. That leaves the other one, hiding the features. And in order to do that, the best way is to use something called feature flags. How many of you use feature flag in your development? Amazing. Congratulations, you're doing it right. So a feature flag, for the few of you who don't know, is just a switch, right? It's very simple. You just toggle the feature, or how can that be? You just turn it on when it's ready. At best, you have it on the server, so you can remote control that feature, but maybe, you know, you just have a Boolean flag in the code, and that's good enough. That means that you can have a bunch of features, right, that you're going to ship with your app, but some of them are just turned off. And when you're ready, you turn it on. Okay, but actually, it's not that simple. I think of feature flag a little bit like dates. Who have had to deal with time zones or all those dates, right? Probably a bunch of you have tried and realized, wait a second, I'm going to use a library for that. It sounds simple, but it's actually not that simple. And the problem is, well, when do I synchronize my set of feature flags with the server? Well, I gotta fetch my feature flag from the server, and when do I refresh that? Startup time, right? I might have a feature that is on my dashboard, the very first screen that my users see when I launch my app. So I'm gonna just do that at startup time. But that means you're blocking the user. So now your user is waiting for your app to load because you're doing a network request just to fetch your feature flags. Okay, well, that's fine. I know how to solve that problem, right? I'm just going to do it asynchronously. But, like I said, the problem is now I am, first and foremost, my feature is not going to show up. So maybe I have a big launch that is planned, and when my users are maybe through a deep link or something like that, launch my app, my feature is not there. And you're off by one. So really, what I mean by that is when you're trying to do something like feature flags, what you're really trying to do is also to A/B test your feature. So in the practical world, I'm simplifying here, but in the practical world, you're also trying to A/B test that feature most of the time. And that means that you are really going to be in a world of pain just because your server thinks that your user is in a certain state and has some feature activated, but your app is actually displaying something different. There's actually a whole framework that was written a long time ago by Facebook's mobile app called Airlock. And when I was there, the problem that we tried to solve with it was both this asynchronous, you know, how to synchronize with the server my feature flags, and the problem of exposing your user to those features and knowing when your A/B test is actually activated. It's a much harder problem than you would think, because what does it mean for a user to see your feature? Well, actually, it depends, right? The only person who truly knows is the developer building that feature. Maybe I have something at the bottom of my screen. Do I send the analytic event when the person scrolls all the way to the bottom? Or do I send it the moment that the person enters the app? And again, if you do it naively and you just check on the server, well, that person is in that A/B test, therefore that person has seen that feature, right? but actually no. Again, you're off by one, and you don't even know if that person has been exposed. So what to do? Well, in my experience, having done all of the above, keep it simple. And the best way that you can fix that problem is to actually do the wrong thing, and Pierre would probably yell at me for saying that, but in terms of performances, when you launch your app, you're probably already doing a bunch of network requests in practice. And fetching a bunch of feature flags is properly implemented is probably fast. So what you really want to do, again, trust me, is actually fetching those feature flags on startup time. Doing the thing that I said earlier was the problem, because in practice, your app will launch just as fast, and you avoid all of those problems. If you cannot do that, then you have to remember everything that I said and properly implement it. Okay, so feature flags are cool, but what they are really enabling is something called continuous delivery or continuous deployment. And that's kind of like the holy grail, right? We want to ideally ship our app and our code continuously. And it has a bunch of very, very good properties that this enables. But again, we cannot do true continuous delivery on mobile. That's just not an option. You have the App Store on iOS, the Play Store on Android, and you just can't do that. So instead, the only thing that you can in practice do is something called release trains. Who among all of you have an app that is on a fixed schedule and that use something called release train? All right, about half the audience. Okay, we're getting there. That's good. So what's a release train, right? A release train means that every week, at a fixed time, the train, that means the release, is leaving the station. Meaning that you're either on board, your feature has been merged, or you're not, sorry. But that's okay, no worries, just catch the next train, meaning the next release. By the way, this means that you want those fixed release schedule to be as short as possible, ideally every week. And there's actually a trend going on in the community where most people that implemented that system started with a 2-week release schedule. But the new trend is actually to ship every single week, which is kind of crazy. So again, for the example of Facebook, they started with a 3-week release schedule, got it down to 2 weeks, and then done again to 1 week. And the reason is because you always have a product manager that says, no, my feature is so important, it has to go in. And then, of course, there is 2 options, right? You can either stop your train, stop everything, we're going to push it by a few days, or, most likely, you have a bunch of developers that go and try to cram that feature at the very last moment. And, of course, that creates a bunch of bugs. So the good properties of release trains are, first of all, they leave on time. Just like you want your train to go. You want it to leave the station on time, let's say every week, Thursday at 4 p.m., no negotiation. Again, if you have done it right and you're shipping every week, it's no big deal, right? A PM might not wait another month, but they will wait another week to ship their feature, especially if they know that at this very time every week, the features are shipped. The second thing is the main branch needs to always be stable, right? In order to make that happen, the only way that this can work is that your app is always releasable. So your main branch has to always be shippable. And finally, like I mentioned, the feature flag that I talked about at the beginning enables you to do that. And so that means that every single feature needs to be behind a feature flag. By the way, that's another pitfall. A lot of the time, developers are like, well, this is something that is not really worth it. I'm not going to bother and put it behind a feature flag. Again, from experience, do it anyways. You'll thank me later. Okay, so let's take a quick example. You have a release train with a bunch of features in it. In this case, it's v1.0. And some of those are turned on, some of those are turned off. And what that means is I can merge all of those features. So again, I'm taking the example of 1 week. I'm going to merge all of those, and then automatically, ideally, after a week, the app is released to the store. The next feature is going to have to wait. So feature 4 didn't make it, sorry, but it's no big deal. It's going to be shipped in, let's say, v1.1. So why do we want to do that? The main benefit is predictability, all right? You don't have to worry about when is my app going to ship, all those synchronization with all the different stakeholders. You know, and everybody knows, that the train is leaving the station on a fixed schedule. The second one is speed, right? What happens in practice is if you don't do that, there's going to be a bunch of features that are going to be either waiting or that are not going to make it to your users as fast. If you ship every week, if you have a small features, it can make it in at minimum a week. If you don't do that, you're shipping at random, you're shipping every month, obviously you're going to wait a long time. The other thing is more like psychological. What happens in practice is people, because they know that they are doing something akin to continuous delivery, they're actually going to work in a way that makes the shipment of features to your users faster. And I've seen it where people implement that, and all of a sudden they realize that they're shipping more, not just better, but also more. Finally, quality. I think this is an interesting property as well. Because main is always stable, you're actually going to increase the quality because you know that you cannot merge a half-baked solution that, yeah, I'll fix it later, but really I won't. You have to have your code already in a shippable state every single time, and that actually in practice increases quality. Now, the last thing is scale. You might not have that problem at the moment, but if you have a lot of different teams that are trying to ship a bunch of different things in parallel, this is really the only method that scales. And the reason is because by combining the feature flags and the release, fixed release process, you can have an arbitrary number of teams working on the same app, and you won't have any problem. Any team can work on their own thing, on their own schedule, put it behind a feature flag, and ship it when it's ready. And this is no accident, right, that most of the big company, I just put a few examples, but really any big company pretty much that you know of, I guarantee you, because I interviewed a bunch of them, they use something like that. They might have some different nuances on how they actually implement it, but they all use something like that. So let me tell you about one you don't know about, which is Maven Clinic. It's a small startup based in the Bay Area, and they actually have achieved what I would call release nirvana. They really have done that process to such a degree that, I kid you not, they almost don't have crashes, and they almost never have to do a hotfix, right? When you're doing all of that, you've done everything right, you think, but actually you have to do a release off schedule just because there is a very bad crash that you need to fix. And so this can really happen. You can really implement all of that and have an app that basically have no issue. This is pretty incredible. Okay, let's talk about another thing related to all of this, which is branching strategies. And this is where it gets a little bit controversial. So the classic release strategy to do all of that is to have a release candidate. And that means that you cut a branch and you're going to stabilize that branch before you actually go and ship it to production. In practice, you're going to have a bunch of conflicts. And so the classic strategy is to just merge back that branch and deal with the conflicts. The other option is to cherry pick, meaning that every fix that you do on that release branch, you also cherry pick to your main branch. As you may imagine, that causes a bunch of issues. And so my recommendation, and this is where all those big apps I just talked about, most of them are not doing it the way that I recommend. They have a release candidate branch, and there is good reason sometimes to do that. But in practice, what I've seen work the best is to not cut a branch at all and to ship directly from your main branch. You don't have to deal with conflicts. You don't have to worry about any of that. You just take the main branch. That's the only branch. It's always stable, and you ship exactly that. All right, another thing that really makes this thrive and really possible is to automate all of those processes. Automate the release, automate the fact that that branch is shipped and go to production at the fixed schedule. If you don't do that, you're going to have a human in the loop trying to go and take that release and ship it. And that's not so bad, but the problem is, in practice, that creates an incentive for the product manager to go and bug that person, make friends with them, buy them gifts, anything they can, right, to get their feature in a little bit later. If it's automated, the developer can go and say, I'm sorry, it's not under my control, right? It just goes out, there's nothing I can do. And of course, it works better with automated tests, right? If you are shipping every single week and you have a manual QA process, it's going to be really, really difficult for those QA team to go and test every single feature every single week. Now, the app I just told you about, Maven Clinic, they actually do that. They actually have a manual QA. So it is possible. If you have not everything automated, your company is using a manual QA process, it is doable. They also told me that their QA team hate their lives at the moment, and they're trying to automate and put those tests fully automated. Finally, what happens once you actually shipped? Well, you have to monitor your release. You probably want to release in phases, in stages. The Google Play Store allows you to do that now. It's been doing that for a long time. You can release to 5% of your user, 10%, everything goes well, and you roll out to 100%. Same thing if you have the feature flags, the fancy version, not a simple Boolean. You can also just release those features gradually as well. So maybe you don't have to have this stage rollout process. Maybe you do that at the feature flag level. Facebook, for example, have a tool called Deltoid, and what they do is whenever they ship anything, you have a whole bunch of business critical metrics that are instantly being tested automatically, meaning that anybody that ships a new thing knows exactly the impact on engagement and any number of other metrics on the business. If anything goes wrong, they can roll it back. Obviously, monitoring is also about crashes and things like that. So if you're not already using one of the many tools to do this, this is kind of critical. Speaking of those tools, this is not endorsement or anything like that, but all of that is, like I said, more complicated than you might think. And so as a result, you really want to not reinvent the wheel and use some of those tools. This is where you're probably thinking that I'm going to plug in my own, but no. There is a bunch of open source software out there that can help you to do that. So for automatic release, the well-known one is Fastlane, but there's actually a bunch of others. Fastlane is a little bit old now. It was taken over by Google, then they didn't really maintain it. No, there is an effort in the community, if you're not aware of that, to bring it back in the mobile foundation in order to have a guarantee that this is going to be maintained. And Google has agreed to do that, to basically let it go and have it maintained by a benevolent community. But regardless, don't reinvent the wheel, use one of those tools. For feature flags, there's a whole bunch as well. There's LaunchDarkly, there's Statsig, so the tool that I was talking about, Deltoid at Facebook, those people actually went and created a company called Statsig that is trying to replicate all of those fancy tools at Facebook, but for everyone, as a SaaS software. Again, if you don't want to pay for anything, there is an open source version of all of that called Flagger. If you want to have feature flags and not pay for a fancy tool, you can just use Flagger. And finally, monitoring. Crashlytics is still alive. I don't know if you guys know that. It's no part of Firebase. I would recommend using Sentry, but you can use any of the many, many tools out there. Please use one, though. And you, if you think that it is not possible, I guarantee you that it is, and I strongly, strongly encourage you to push for all those best practices within your team or your company. The benefits are incredible. Every single company that I've seen implement those strategies have benefited an enormous amount. And not just the developers, right? Again, the product managers, the business people, people you don't want to talk to, they actually will love that. They might push back because, again, they're used to negotiate when their features are going out. But once they see the benefit, in general, they end up really loving it. So I could talk about that for hours. So there's a lot of things that I haven't covered, and I'd rather open it up for questions. So thank you.